Hi everyone, welcome back to CSharpCorner Live. I'm your host Stephen Simon, and we are back with another episode of Ask Me Anything series. I am personally very excited for this episode as we have one of the very amazing guests joining us today. He has been in this industry for close to 35 years, and this show, next 45 minutes, is going to be all about architecture, data, and pretty more exciting stuff coming up. And if you're someone who's joining us for the very first time, I think this is episode number 27, and we have been streaming this Ask Me Anything series almost like all through this pandemic, and not just on Thursdays. If you're someone who is joining us for the very first time, we do this Azure AI show every Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern and 8:30 p.m. IST, where we talk about the different services and the entire ecosystem of AI that Microsoft has to provide on Azure. Then on Wednesdays, same timing at 10 a.m. Eastern, we do a CSharpCorner MVP show. That it's a show dedicated to where we invite CSharpCorner MVPs, talk about their journey of contributing to the community. One of my personal favorite show that I like to always tune in. Then we have, of course, Thursdays we do AMA. Then, of course, of all these technical shows, we also have a show that's called Growth Mindset. I just misspelled it. All right, there we go. I did fix it. Okay, growth mindset, where we not talk about how you can go ahead and be a better, achieve better in your career and all that stuff. That's measured by Maheshan, who's the founder of CSharpCorner. Then on Saturdays, we have Rocking the Code World with .NET Dave. Now, this is a very interesting show. I think David has interviewed like Matt Stodgerson, Scott Hunter, Caitlin Dollard, Kendera, and quite a few people in his show. So he runs it every Saturdays. Apart from this, we keep on doing our virtual conferences that happen almost every other week. During this pandemic, we did close to 10 virtual conferences and many offline conferences when things were okay. And in the coming year, we plan to do at least 2021 virtual conferences. And it would be great if we could go ahead and do some offline conferences too. Having said that, for today's guest, we have Buck Woody. I'll go ahead and give a quick introduction about him. Buck Woody works on Azure Data Services team at Microsoft and uses data and technology to solve businesses and science problems. With over 35 years of professional and practical experience in computer technology, he's also a popular speaker at conferences around the globe. And guess what? He has authored 700 articles and 8 books on databases. My goodness, if I just go ahead and ask him to go ahead and tell all his articles, even that would take many hours. He has worked on machine learning, R. He also sits on various data science boards with 2 US universities. Specialization in advanced data analysis and technique. That's a lot. I'll leave a bit for him to go ahead and introduce. So thank you everyone who is joining. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, but it's going to be a really interesting show. So without any further ado, let's go and invite our guest, Buck Woody, into the live Ask Me Anything show. Welcome, Buck. Welcome to the live show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, Simon. Thanks for inviting me today.
Yeah, but we're really excited to have you. But thank you so much for accepting the invitation. And although we have the introduction video, and I did go ahead and video introduction, still as the format of the show, I'll ask you to go ahead and give a quick introduction about who you are, what you do, and how your life has been all through these last 7 to 8 months of this pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. Well, where do we start? I guess I was born at a very early age. I don't know. I've traveled around the world a lot. I've lived in a couple of countries. I was in the military for a while, worked at NASA for a bit, and then US Space Command in Florida there, launching some of the rockets and things like that. I've been an IT dev. I've done security admin, sysadmin, hardware, network, wiring, all those kinds of things. just about everything in IT. I've been a manager a few times, off and on,
Mhm.
an IT director at some small companies and some large companies. I've been an architect a few times, and I've been a consultant a few times.
Mhm.
In fact, one of the times that I was a consultant, it was on architecture. So this is a really important topic to me. I've
Mhm.
worked on everything starting in the late 70s, from sort of building my own computer and writing the operating system and my own debuggers and so on, all the way up through mainframes and mini frames. And then when mini computers came out, PCs and so on. My first love after I got out of sort of the mainframe, mini frame world was the Commodore Amiga. If anybody even remembers that, that was one of my favorite computers to work with. I've worked with some very obscure systems, system called PIC, which was a medical purpose-built system, IBM AS400s, just a little bit of everything. I'm currently working at Microsoft for the last
Yeah.
15 years. I was on the SQL Server team as a program manager, helping to develop SQL Server 2008, and then left and worked in the field for a while, a technical specialist on SQL Server and databases in general, business intelligence, that sort of thing. I then joined this little startup we had called Red Dog, which became Microsoft Azure. So I was on the
Oh my
team to
goodness.
help build Microsoft Azure, and then left that and became a consultant, an architect down here in Florida for Microsoft, working with the Department of Defense. And that's as much as I can say about that, but doing different architectures. And
Mhm.
then recently I've joined the machine learning and AI team at Microsoft. And then about
Mhm.
2 years ago, I spoke with the SQL Server team because, it's got R and Python and Java built in now. So you can
Mhm.
do machine learning right in the database. And we have a new product called Big Data Clusters, which has Spark as well. And it runs on Kubernetes and that sort of thing. So I came over to sort of help in that area. So
Mhm.
myself, Anna Hoffman, who you've had on recently, and Bob Ward, amazing guy. We work kind of as a little group inside the engineering organization, and we
Mhm.
do teaching and presentations and a lot of public speaking and content development, and we work with the product group creating the software as well. So that's
Mhm.
kind of me in a nutshell.
Oh my goodness! So it looks like you have been a part of this industry right from when it started, like you said, in 1970s. And pretty interesting that you said that the Red Dog turned into the Azure, even then you were involved at that very early stage. And what will be very interesting to know that, as you say, you have been a part of this Microsoft for the past 15 years, and we have seen Microsoft really changing a lot in the last decade, right? I see the Microsoft journey from Windows Windows Azure to Microsoft
Yeah.
Azure, right? And that was a big transformation. How do you see, as a customer, definitely things have changed. You've been an employee for almost like 15 years. How do you see Microsoft has changed as a leadership from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic. Me
Mhm.
joining back in the beginning of 2006
Mhm.
was a different world, right? Windows
Mhm.
Phone tried to compete with the iPhone, and we competed against everyone. We
Mhm.
attempted to go, you had to do things our way. And I think what you've seen is more of an embrace and extend modality that we're taking now.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is if you've got something, we try to meet you where you are. We're using Kubernetes.
Yeah.
We're a huge contributor to open source, that sort of thing. And we work well with the Apple infrastructure and so on.
Mhm.
We try to be a good IT citizen. There are things we can do better, of course.
Mhm.
But we do try. I've seen this really flip, but throughout my time here at Microsoft, no matter what role I've been in, we have always, in my experience, I'm not certain this is the same for everybody, but we have always tried to put the customer first where we can. There are sometimes you make decisions that are painful, but in large part, we really do. We spend a lot of time. We agonize over what people tell us about how things need to be, and so on.
Yeah, definitely. I remember when you talk about the Windows Phone, the UWP. Microsoft did try to push a lot, but it didn't work out. But they realized it and then stepped back. And when talking about open source and collaboration, Microsoft has been collaborating a lot. Maybe Linux, maybe although .NET Core is open source, I mean, it's cross-platform. I also see some of the guys working with AWS. So yeah, definitely Microsoft has changed a lot. I already see many questions coming in the comments. Keep your questions coming, and
Yeah.
right, I see people asking about the best architecture practices and all that stuff. Keep your questions coming up. Buck will go ahead and get started with your presentations,
Yeah.
and
Let
then
me
as
let me let me share my screen, and I don't like to use slides when I don't have to. I teach using whatever I can, right? So I
Mhm.
don't really. Let me know. Can you see the screen now? Okay.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right, perfect. All right. So for those of you listening, what we're going to do is walk through these slides here. And again, there's only four, but we'll walk through each of these. I would like you, as Simon pointed out, go ahead
Mhm.
and develop your questions. And what we'll do is this. I'll work through these slides, and we'll try to get through these quickly, and then we'll just deal with your questions from then on. At the end of this session, I promise I will give you this slide deck, and everything that I reference. I've got quite a few references because this is just such a huge topic. I will give you links to every one of those. So let me do this. It's 10:14. I got to keep an eye on the time
Mhm.
to do these things. So first of all, let me set the stage. We're going to be talking about data architecture, but architecture in general. And this is one of my absolute favorite roles in the world. Now, you may not have an architect role. In other words, it's not something you do full time every day. Larger companies normally have full-time architects, but many of us are asked to perform the architect function. Regardless of whether it's your day-to-day job or something you'll take on, I think you'll find that the architect role or function is just a fascinating place. It's one of my favorites to be. I tend to dive deep on things and then come back up and move over and dive deep on something else. And over time, you're building a breadth of knowledge, and that breadth will help you be a very good architect. So I'll give you some advice. I do a lot of career counseling, and one of the things I tell IT professionals is this, and I'll say it slowly. In an immature industry, generalize. And in a mature industry, specialize. What do I mean by that? First of all, if the industry is new, let's take medicine a couple hundred years ago. You're probably not old enough to remember that. I am, but you're not. But the idea was that your general practitioner, your GP doctor, your town doctor, would know a lot about a little. So they wouldn't know very much in depth. They would know a wide range of things, and they were generalists because the industry was quite immature. As time went on and the industry matured, you began to get specialist doctors. And perhaps she specializes in eyes or ears or whatever it happens to be. IT is very similar. I've seen these paradigms now for the past 40 years come and go. And as they do, when something is introduced, it's new. For instance, data science, let's say, when a few years ago, when data science became kind of a common term, um, the data scientists did everything from the data wrangling through the data feature engineering, all the way through the model building, and then the testing, and then the experimentation, and then the deployment, and so on. And they even wrote code to do the scoring, it's called, or where you got the prediction. Well, now as time has gone on, you've got data engineers and AI developers and so on. They begin to specialize. So all that to say, the architect role is very much a generalist. So let's jump in. I'm going to go, I get accused all the time by folks at work of moving too quickly, but I will give you links so you can go expand. Think of this as a zip file of information, and you have to go uncompress it when we're done. First of all, what is an architect? So we know what an architect, the word architect means. But an IT architect, as it says here, basically they take a lot of factors in and they make high-level decisions around design. And they usually are trying to come up with a solution. Now, the important bit to note here, let me see if I can highlight this because it's, oops, let me go forward here. Click the wrong button there by accident. So there we go. Implementation, operation, security, and business continuity. So that's important to keep in mind. and I have just left my slide. Isn't that awesome? Let's do that again. That was pretty good. I'm having all kinds of challenges here. All right. But the point is this. We often think about the architect at the very front designing something and then moving on. But a good architect should design something so that not only it can be implemented well, but it also can be operated well, that it is secure and it's recoverable. And not even, we're not talking about HADR here, high availability and disaster recovery. We're talking one level back, business continuity. And this brings in my first point. An architect considers really two big domains of knowledge. One is what the organization needs, the business or whatever organization, government, whatever you happen to be in, and they have to know a lot about what the business does. I know lots of developers and system administrators that have told me, I don't care what my business does, I do IT. And that's fine. It's fine to focus like that, but an architect can't take that stance. They absolutely need to focus on what the business does. And here's what they kind of need to be able to understand on the other side. They need to understand the requirements. What does the business or organization need? And then they need to understand the options. That's the other big domain of knowledge. So what options do they have? If you only know how to do one platform, then that's what you're going to suggest every time. It might surprise you to learn that I actually research all kinds of platforms, not just the Microsoft one, because as much as I would like it to be, it's not a Microsoft only world. It doesn't quite work like that. It's more than just us. So we need to think about that as we go. And then you need to apply constraints. What did the comedians say? Every place is walking distance if you have the time, right? So time is the constraint. So people are always constrained by money. They'll tell you, oh, we want to never be down. The system can never be down. And then you present a bill for the design that's never down. And they look at that and go, well, it can be down a little. So they obviously change. And then what you need to do is create a design using frameworks. And we'll talk about what those frameworks are in just a moment. You also need to suggest options, like you do it this way, you can do it this way, or you can do it this way. Usually I try to do 3, good, better, best. And then they usually pick the good one and expect the best one. But your role is also to coordinate functions. You actually have to coordinate functions. I'm going to pop over to my first sort of slide, site here. There is a site. Where did it go? There it is. And I've got all these links for you, so don't try to memorize these. There actually are certifications you can get. This is a full up professional thing you can do. So definitely something to keep in mind, that you can go get certified on these things. All right. So if that's the capabilities or what you need to know, you can see why you want to be in IT for a little while before you become an architect, because you won't have exposure to many businesses or options until you've worked a lot of places. It's not a problem to work in lots of industries. I've worked in tons, so that's not a problem. So then there are types of architects. Remember we talked about when the industry is immature, you generalize. There used to just be an IT architect back in the day. Now, of course, there are much more than that. There's software architects, and there's something called an enterprise architect. There's a cloud architect, and then usually when you're performing a function, not the role, you're called a solution architect. And that means you're going to zero in on one function for a while, and maybe you go back to being the lead dev or whatever it is. We're going to focus on one of the specializations, a data architect. We're going to drill into that sort of a little more. Whether you're an IT architect, a solution architect, you need some tools to work with. So let's pop over and take a look at those. I'm going to stop here. Simon, do we want to take questions now, or just keep pushing through and take them all at once? What do you want to do?
I think we'll go ahead and take one after some time. Yeah.
Okay, go for it. You got any?
We got it. Yeah, I think we got one from Gina. If you'd like to go ahead and answer that one. It says, what key data architecture advice would you give to people on tiny teams? Think 2 experienced plus 1 junior. How do you balance innovation and passion with support? That's a very good question, I think, sir.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
We want to put the latest, newest thing in, but somebody's got to live with this, right? What is the old developer statement is, write code as if the person that has to maintain it after you is insane and they know where you live, right? So something to always keep in mind. Great question, Gina. I'd recommend this. Going through some of the tools and processes I will show you would be very useful, even if you're not an experienced IT person. Exposing yourself to some of these tools and frameworks will give you a nice way to put it inside a structure that you can deliver to your team, if that's you. Whatever person is doing that. Now, this will also begin the journey towards being an architect. I highly recommend, if you've been in IT for a very long time, take a role as an architect once, even if you don't stay there. Just give that a go. It gives you a huge view of how IT really works. And innovation and passion is great, and you need to do that, but you do need to support. So here's kind of what I do. I tend to allow anybody that works with me or for me to go off and do a project that they're interested in. And I pick a function we need, a list or a checkbox or something that we need. And I say, go try your favorite tech on that project. But you do have to keep doing the work we need done. So in other words, we need to eat tonight. I love to cook. So we need to eat tonight. So I may experiment with a side dish, but I make sure the main dish is something we can all eat. I love to cook Indian food. And so the side dishes, I'll try something new, but the main dishes that I know how to make, that Rogan Josh or, butter chicken or whatever I'm going to make, I make sure I get that perfect first. So there's this core work that needs to be done, but you do want your people to be able to stretch their legs a little bit, because if they don't, they'll leave you. If they're doing the same thing all the time, they're not being creative, they'll leave. So you want to give small projects off to each person and say, work on this, but we've got to pay the taxes, is the way. Great question. You have another one, or you keep going?
If you want, we can take one more, but that's coming from internal channels. You want me to go ahead and say that? It's quite generic.
Yeah, pop it up there. Let's just do it. We got time.
Okay. Yeah, so it's coming from Raghav. He says, do architects needs to be a developer? And the reason I picked this question is because Gina says she has a very small team. So maybe sometimes if she wants to move to be an architect, she might have to go ahead and code. So do architect needs to be a developer, or what do you think?
Yeah, so I'll give my opinion. This is the gospel according to Buck Woody. It's not this is not Microsoft or anything else. This is just what I think. I actually think a good architect, an experienced architect, should probably have experience in almost every IT role. I really do, and maybe even the business. And maybe even do that. I worked at a medical company one time, and I was the IT director, and they had a very interesting process for anyone that started in IT, including the director. You had to work for 7 weeks at one of the hospitals in patient care, like driving around and delivering supplies. You weren't allowed to do operations or anything, but you had to be involved with that. And then the latter part of the 7 weeks, you had to work in IT support. You had to sit in the support center and take support calls.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Yeah.
And so it kind of gave you a taste of, oh my gosh, because what they said was, the IT we're doing here affects patients. So you need to think about them in everything you do. So I personally think if you're not a developer, you need to have some development experience. I think everybody in IT should learn to write some language of code. Doesn't matter what it is, Python, anything that's object oriented or functional. Grab one, learn it. A data language, which we're going to talk about in a moment, is a great place to start. So it's a great set of questions. Hopefully that answered that question. The answer is yes, I think you do, or at least you had to have programmed. If I'm going to tell a developer what to do, I better be familiar with what they do during the day. So let's jump over to some tools and frameworks. The first thing I want to look here are some frameworks. You can look any or all of these up. Just hit Wikipedia. I've got some links for you, but Wikipedia is fine. One of them is called ITIL, I-T-I-L. And then there's MOF, the Microsoft Operations Framework, which became Solution Accelerators. And then one of the big ones now is something called TOGAF, T-O-G-A-F. And you can get training on all of these. The Department of Defense has their own. Many of these are based off of something called a Zachman framework. The key is to research those processes and to know them at least at a high level, so you know what's involved. At least use it as a place to familiarize. And Gina, as we were talking a moment ago, you definitely want, just take a look. Gina, I'd recommend TOGAF because it's just become the standard. MOF, the Microsoft Operations Framework, which is older, is much more simple than TOGAF. If you're going to look at one of the specialty ones, DoD or NIST, they're pretty deep. You may have to play in those worlds. So I definitely recommend you start with the framework. The framework is the process, and it gives you a place to sort of hang things. And then when you need to start doing things, you need two kinds of tools. One, they're called symbolics. We all have these languages we use. Inside databases, we use something called an entity relationship diagram, an ERD, that shows tables and relationships and so on. The very simplest, and I'm going to pop over here, is called a network diagram. And when I say this, I'm actually talking about mathematical network diagrams, not network diagrams like hook the Cisco router to this wire. You need to know that probably too. The BPMN and UML, those are the three we're going to take a look at here. I'm just going to pop over. And when I talk about this inside math, this is actually called a graph. And there are two kinds of graphs. There is a directed graph, which means it goes in a certain way. And there's an acyclic graph, which does not cycle back and so on. But basically, here's a directed graph. These are just objects. These things are just objects. And these things indicate a path of motion. That's it. So once you have that concept down, which you now have it down, but I would advise, by the way, you go out and just take a look at how these things work. They can be quite complex. This is a force-based diagram and so on. Many of these are used inside machine learning to do deep learning and so on. But once you've gotten that down, the next one I recommend you learn, this is kind of interesting, is something called Business Process Model Notation, or BPML. It's very simple to read. It uses these things called swim lanes, and they can be lots of things. Here, this is a pizza order process. Maybe you've seen this before. There are very few primitives, which are these images, like a circle and a square and a diamond and so on. There's very few of them, so that makes it accessible. And it shows what happens here. The customer is hungry, so they select and order a pizza, and they place an order. And then that goes down to the pizza shop, and at the pizza shop clerk receives the order and sends it off to the pizza chef. Meantime, the person has waited longer than 60 minutes, so they send an angry email or call to the pizza shop clerk saying, "Where's my pizza?" And I love this box here. Calm the customer down. Be calm, customer. Your pizza is on the way. This person bakes the pizza is delivered, and so on. And you can see kind of how the flow goes. So business process model notation is a great way just to get the thoughts in your head organized. So I highly advise you look up BPMN, business process model notation, and look at that. This is specifically for business processes, though. As we begin to move into software design and stuff, there are other lexicons or languages you might use. I just found this one with a quick search. I don't know who this is, Talify, I don't know what that is. But this is called the Unified Modeling Language, UML. Some people use this, some people don't. I do, but there are various diagrams you can represent in UML. There's behavioral, structural, and so on, activities, and so on. So let's take a look at an activity diagram. This is very similar to what you just saw, but you can also show this, which is a use case diagram. This is very useful when you're doing your architecture work. So when you're trying to architect a system, the first thing you need to know is who does what and how do they interact. As you're designing your system, you need to be able to sort of figure that out. So highly advised that you use those. Now I'm often asked, well, what tools do you use to draw things? I will use anything. I'll use, MS Paint. I'll use anything to draw things. But my go-to for architecture has been Visio. It's what I know. I used it way before Microsoft. Don't make that face. I like it because the symbols inside of it have properties. So I can describe them, and then it's got lots of reports. I can print one out for one team and one for another. Because what you're doing here at the end of the day, you're communicating. That's what you're doing. You're communicating to another team to do things. So to do that, you need nice, clear graphics. Don't let the graphics get in the way of explaining what you're doing. That's the whole point of it. There are others. I've used Lucidchart is what I taught at when I taught at the University of Washington. We use Lucidchart, Glyphy. I've used SmartDraw. I have not used YWorks or D3M. And there's a million of these. These are just graphing tools. So let's pause after this slide. We only got one more after this. And let's talk through any more questions we have, Simon, if you're still around, or maybe.
Yeah, I'm still there. All right. So all right. So let's go ahead and pick one question that's coming from Bhaskar. Let me fix my screen. Okay, perfect. He's asking, Buck, we need both application and data architecture, but which one we should prefer first while designing solution? Why and on which conditions?
Yeah, that is a great question, right? I ordered from Amazon a chicken, and then I ordered an egg, and whichever one gets here first, I'll let you know. No, it's a great question, and I would say here comes the database administrator in me. It depends. That's our answer for everything. I would say personally that I usually start with the data side, the objects and their relationships, because to me, all development, let me say this slowly, all programming is rearranging data.
Okay.
Simon, do you agree with that?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
So when I write a program, it's doing something, right?
Yeah.
So I take an empty field and I put Buck and Woody and my address in it. So I have move data. And then when I move, I have to write an application that says, let Buck edit his address. So I'm rearranging data. When I play a video game, a pixel is moving from here to here to here, and that's moving data, and so on. If you go all the way back to where I started, which is studying microprocessor concepts, you see that our first problem was computation, math. We had to figure out how a computer, a system, a device could add and subtract numbers, and then do that at scale for multiplication and division. And so when that happened, when we got done with that, we had to store the results somewhere, and so the register was born. If you look at an abacus, going back all the way to that kind of computing, or the quippy that you had inside Native American culture, where they used strings and they would tie knots in the strings to do calculations. That is recording data, and it's modifying data. All programming is modifying data. So I normally start with the data architecture. Now, that's not to be said these things can't be done concurrently. If you look at some of these processes like UML, they'll say, okay, there's some data here, and we don't worry about it. We're going to move it from here to here. And the data architect says, wait a minute, whoa, what kind of data is that? What's the columns? What's the rows? Is it structured, non-structured? What's the relationship? What's the security profile? What's the CRUD matrix? So I personally start with data and work out, because data is everything. It's the object that I deal with. And then the relationships to me are the program. That's my thought.
Perfect. So that makes sense. We have a few questions coming in. If you want, I can just take it now, or maybe later on.
Yeah, pop another one. I've only got one more slide, and then we could just do questions from here on
Okay,
out.
so I don't know if I understand this. Maybe you could. Maybe I'll just put it on the screen. So
okay, let's find out.
You can help me understand. It says, could you please? It might be. Could you please let me know when to go for Lambda Architect versus Kappa? I've not heard about it. Yeah. So.
Yeah, so these basically just have to do with coding architecture. So we're going to focus on data today rather than lambdas and kappas. And the reason why is those will affect data. But the answer to that is very complicated, but it's also very easy to find out. I can look up some things for you, but probably not within the time scope we sort of have here. I know that's not very helpful, but there are choices. Yeah, there are hard choices you make. If you start with the data, it will often tell you whether you're going to use Lambda or Kappa to begin with.
Yeah, I think that should help. I mean, there were tons of resources. Just a simple Google search should help. All right, so I think we'll go ahead and you can go with your last slide. Then we'll come back. We'll take a few more questions.
Sounds good. Okay. So we were in the tools area. I will give you links for all these, I promise. And then we'll go from there. All right. Now let's talk about why we're here. So what, 30 minutes in and I finally get to the point. My wife and several people that work with me would tell you that's also very common when talking to me. I set up the question for an hour and then I say yes. So that's what I do. So designing a data architecture really just involves a couple of things, really three. Storage, how it's going to be stored, where it's going to be stored, the process for storing it. Is it cold storage? Is it specific storage, like is it computed storage like an RDBMS? The compute you lay over the top of it, whether that's storage and compute separate, such as a scale out architecture like Spark or something, or HDFS, or whether it is combined on top like a relational database management system and so on. And then how you're going to move it around. Especially when we start talking about large scale data like data lakes and so on. And again, no time to cover all that today. But the concept you're looking to learn more about is pipelines. So let's dive into this a little bit. And then I'll pop over to some resources. I'm going to give you a ton of resources to sort of do this. The first thing you need to understand is everything we've been talking about. To be a good data architect, you need to understand what an architect does. And so I'm going to show you three very cool resources, and I will give you all of these. I've lost my mouse here. There it is. I'm seeing it on the screen that I'm projecting and the screen at the same time. That's what's confusing me, although it's pretty easy to confuse me. Let me just close a few of these out here, and we'll go straight to this. So we've got a site, and I'm going to give you this. It's called the Azure Architecture Center, but the name is a bit misleading because whether you're using Azure or another product, or you're even staying on-prem, there's an absolute ton of resources that we've made available. I cannot tell you the number of articles that are here that are kept up to date in great detail, right? So the first thing you might want to do is just like, oh my gosh, where do I even start? Well, I normally start with the assess. And so we've got something called the Microsoft Azure Well-Architected Framework, and that's right here. And what we do here is you pick a reason for doing something. So here we have cost optimization. Your company has told you we want to save money. Maybe operational excellence. Maybe you've had some quality control issues and they're like, look, we need to stop and we need to re-architect this thing to where it's got a better operational profile. Maybe you need to work on performance. Maybe it's things are just too slow. They're not happening fast enough. Or maybe reliability. Let's just click on the reliability one. And when we look at the pillar for reliability, it tells you exactly what to do. Build for reliability, define your requirements, and then it gives you each and every part of what you need to do. All of this is, now this is if you've picked stability to be your primary driver. Now, all of these things are important, but there's going to be one that's really important, more importanter. And when you look at this, you can see inside the reliability pillar, here's your application design that you asked about. Here's the design overview for designing resilient applications. It tells you what to do. By the way, if you have an outage in the cloud, you have not been following best practices. We actually explain what you need to do even for cloud outages. So they are here, how to handle errors, your failure handling, and so on, how to do backup and recovery, and even how you go and talk to your business about these availability targets that you might have and how to tell them what to do. They say, hey, our service level agreement says that we need just 2 nines. That means you're allowed to be down for this amount of hours per week. A lot of businesses don't know that. When you tell them you're 99% available, that means you're going to be down for 2 hours a week. Depending on when that 2 hours is, that can be really bad. And here's your recovery metrics. These are incredibly important for the data architect to understand the difference between RPO and RTO. We don't have time to cover that today. That's a whole session I do as well. But RPO and RTO are different. They have to do with when you went down versus when you came back up, and how much data you lost when you went down. That's what those things have to do with each other. There's a very fun set of things to do called chaos engineering. That's not how you normally develop software. That's just how that works. So this is an incredibly useful tool. Let me pop back over here to Slide World a moment. because I want to get to, let me go to the DevOps one first. I did have that up. And I have a full article for you here. We just updated this last year for doing DevOps. You should definitely use DevOps as a driver. DevOps is not something that a team does. If you have a DevOps team, you have failed at DevOps. DevOps is a way of doing things for everyone. And the easiest way to think about it is look left. Often what I do is I do my job and I toss it over the fence and it's their problem now. DevOps means I need to think all the way down the line to where the app is not only deployed, but it's debugged and so on and re-architected. I need to plan that in my steps, regardless of where I am along the path. We talk a great deal about how the data flows for that sort of thing. So I did want to bring that one up before we moved on. So let's do this. Let's go to the next one, and then we are almost done here with these slides. This is the link I want you to get, aka.ms DAG, Data Architecture Guide. So this is where we're going to spend the rest of the time, and then we'll get out and I'll promise I'll give you the slide decks. And so here it is. The Data Architecture Guide is just absolutely essential for you to read if you're dealing with data architecture. Basically explains everything from traditional RDBMS out to big data and others. And what you do is, let me just scroll down here. You simply pick a particular architecture that you're interested in. Let's say relational data here, and you need to do ETL. When you need to do ETL, it explains the entire process, how that works, what you can do it with, and so on. Even if you're not going to use Azure, you will learn amazing amounts of information. And remember, as I said at the very beginning about 30 minutes ago, you need to be thinking about what the options that you have are. Maybe you're not interested in going to the cloud, fine. At least know what's available. But then here's OLAP processing, which is online analytical processing. It explains all that, how to do semantic modeling and so on. You've got non-relational information here. So remember I said earlier, you need to have a good background in not only structured data, but non-structured data, data at flight, data at rest, encrypted data, and so on. You'll find all of those here. The neat idea is there's also, as Anna Hoffman recently did a session on, there's a full way to choose different, because how do I know what to pick? There's so many options. Look at all this. How do I know which one to pick? Well, we go down and we explain all the selection criteria. We do a capability matrix and so on. This particular topic inside this resource basically has your education for being a data architect. And I point this out to people, most people don't even know it's here, and which is distressing. I'd like for people to know that it's there. And then we have a full cloud adoption framework as well. I'm gonna give you this link as well. Even if you decide, I don't want to use the cloud, you can actually walk through the foundational decisions and you'll know why you've picked the route you've picked. Even if you don't pick Azure, if you pick something else, you can just extrapolate from here. And just to make it even more easy to do, we've done an entire Channel 9 series of learning on the entire process of the cloud adoption framework. Oh my gosh. Just so many different things. And by the way, just a quick plug for the my good friends at CSharpCorner. If you type in Azure Architect Styles, you'll see that Abhishek has already done a full article which covers a lot of what I've talked about today. So you've got just so many resources. So that being said, let me pop out to that last slide there. And then we'll take questions. We got about 15 minutes left, so we're in good shape. Don't write these down. You only need the yellow one. You only need the yellow one at the top. So Simon, if they go to this, I'll let everybody, if you need to screenshot or if you need to, we'll just sit here a minute. If you do that, you'll go to that data architecture guide. You'll go to this deck. The last slide in the deck has all of the links I've showed you, including CSharpCorner and the Ask Me Anything that Anna did, which when you're selecting your architecture folds nicely into this discussion. So we'll leave that up. And so now, Simon, why don't we just take questions from here on out?
Yeah, we'll definitely take it back. I did share this tiny URL into the comments. So if
Oh,
someone who
perfect.
just wants to go ahead
Perfect.
and click on it, and they can just don't do it now. We want you guys to be in the live show. Do it later on and keep your questions coming. And really interesting bug that you showed, this channel line page. I've been following channel line for a very long time. But one thing that I'm really disappointed is that we do not have MBA platform anymore. I really miss Microsoft Virtual Academy. Don't you miss that?
Yes, I taught, I think, 3 or 4 courses at MVA.
Mhm.
Now we do have MS Learn now, which that
Yeah.
become, and MS Learn, certain courses even have a lab built in. Anna developed one of those. Anna and Bob
Mhm.
Ward developed one of those to where you get the environment. So it's
Mhm.
you can learn for free while
Yeah.
you're reading the learning, which is just amazing.
Yeah, I like that on the right hand side. If you're maybe creating an Azure resource, they have this kind of sandbox where they give you maybe a temporary subscription that runs for like 2 hours. Then you can go ahead and do the things practically. So yeah, we definitely love that platform too. I'll pull up the question. It says, okay, could you, okay, all right. I don't know if this makes sense. Most of the companies don't have an application architect and it's leads developer who handle application architecture. How do you move to the architectural role then?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as I
Mhm.
started off, I
Mhm.
mentioned earlier that I've loved that role.
Mhm.
However, the function can be painful because you're asked to have this huge body of knowledge and do a real job. While you're flying a jet, we need you to do brain surgery in the back, right? It is 2 different jobs, and they ask you to do that. And so it is very true. And by the way, pace yourself, don't get burnt out.
Mhm.
Learn these things when you have time. I carve out time each morning. I get up early and carve out time to learn something new every day. Done that my whole life. And I will do it tomorrow. I will never stop spending time first thing in the morning learning about a new or interesting technology or learning what's changed in my current technology. To get a role in architecture, you're probably going to need to be at one of 2 places. Someplace very large, company with greater than 5 to 10,000 people
Mhm.
who implement software solutions all the time. So that would be the first place you might look. The second place you might go is as a consultant, because a
Okay.
lot of times, if you don't have time to do that design work, consulting can be a great role because every time you consult in a new area, you then take that knowledge and you can use it somewhere else, and it gets a little broader and broader and broader. And that's what I did. The times that I've been a full time architect. One time I was a full time architect at a company because we wrote that much software. Because again, keep in mind, IT is like a house, really, when you think about the architect role. The house architect sits down with you and she may ask you, okay, what do you want? How big do you want? I mean, do you guys cook a lot? Do you have and so on. And then when she's done, she brings in a set of blueprints, which is our BPMN or
Mhm.
UML. And she says, this is what I can make for you. What do you think? And you make changes and you go back. And then she coordinates with all of the people that build that stuff and work. So how many houses do you normally build? Right? You normally build one and you're done.
Mhm.
Most
Yeah.
companies develop a system and they're done. It's now working and they're off to their real job, which is building cars or running hospitals or whatever it happens to be. So if you're going to be at a company that their main job isn't IT, you probably won't have an architect role there. But as a
Yeah.
consultant, they may call you in if you're good at what you do and allow you to provide that function. Every year in January, I sit down January 1st and I make a little matrix, and it's called Stay and Stay, Stay and Go, Go and Stay, Go and Go. So I'll explain what that means, Simon. The Stay and Stay means I'm going to stay at Microsoft and I'm going to stay in my current role. I'm going to
Okay.
do what I do now. And then I write down, what am I going to do better? Because I can't just keep doing what I'm doing. My boss will not let me do that. I need to be better than I was. So what
Mhm.
do I need to do? Here's my plan. Then the stay and go means I want to stay at Microsoft, but I want to do something new. And I've done that 5 times at Microsoft. I've moved around inside Microsoft 5 different times. And
Mhm.
so where would I want to go? What would I want to learn? How would I do that? Who would I talk to? And I make a plan. The go and stay means I'm done with Microsoft. I want to go work for some other company. And so what would I do? What company would I go to? What would I tell them I'm good at? How would I tell them that? When would I do this? Why would I do this? And so on. And then there's the go and go. And that is, I don't want to be at Microsoft and I don't want to do what I'm doing. Right. And so in that case, I think about, well, what would I do if I didn't have to do what I'm doing? Every year I do that in January. And of course, I've been here 15 years. So 15 times I've decided to either stay or stay and go. I've never done the go and go or the go and stay, but I still do it every year.
So you leave that space of go and go as empty over there?
No. I plan it out as if I write the plan, I act like I'm going to do it. I act like I'm going to do it. I want to go be an emu farmer in Oregon or something. I write down everything I would do. And I really do that. And I plan it like I was really going to do that. So to answer this question, you're going to need to go to where the role is. And you might have to move. My uncle once told me you can pick what you do or where you live, not both.
Wow, and that's very well answered.
Yeah, if I wanted to be a snow ski instructor, I probably can't stay in Tampa.
Wow, but I think that's one of the best answer we could get it to the one who questioned us. So I think that's very well answered. Let's go ahead and take a question that's coming from the data architecture. It is, as a data architect, what are the challenges related to the company's data security, and how do you ensure the integrity of the data was not compromised?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go through those resources that you have there, you'll see one of them is security. And especially if you're working in a high value industry like banking or medical. But you know what? To me, there's no low value data. If you lose data, that's on you as the data architect. Security should not be something you do at the end. You should do your CRUD matrix. That's create, read, update, and delete. You should do that on every datum that you design. You should know who can get at that and how. Every time someone takes your data and saves it as an Excel spreadsheet, and we know that happens, that's a security leak. That's a hole. So what do you do? How do you figure that? So there's a whole bunch of links in there on securing your data. Think about it at the front. And DevOps covers that too. You need to think about, where does this, I always think of data as in a garden hose. And in that hose, are there holes? And if holes, then water's coming out.
Yeah.
And you say, well, they're just downloading an Excel file. That's a hole. And water's going out, and you're losing water.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's go ahead and take one question from Mike. He's asking, we have many questions coming, but I don't think so we'll be able to cover all that. We have only 5 minutes left. So let's take one question from Mike. He said, is it better to use NoSQL databases for analysis and reporting?
So are you ready for this earth-shattering answer? It depends.
Yeah.
So the first thing I do to answer you, do I need schema on read or schema on write? Do I have a structured schema? And if I do, I can either be in NoSQL or SQL, okay? And the next question I ask is, what's my consistency constraint? Do I have a consistency constraint? If you have ragged data, that means that name, address, phone, and then the next datum that comes in is name, favorite color, and favorite pizza. Right? That's ragged data. They don't fit. And I don't want to keep making columns out this way because I'll end up with sparse data. That's perfect for a document database inside NoSQL. There is a book I'm going to recommend to you, Mike, and it's called 7 Databases in 7 Weeks. I read this like once a year, this book. I'm not sure when the latest version was out. This person goes through and they use Postgres for the relational database, which we support, by the way, Microsoft supports. I use SQL Server obviously more often, but I use Postgres as well. And he goes through and details, he does a project a week and he builds a solution in each of 7 database types. And he explains why he chose that. 7 databases in 7 weeks, highly, highly recommended.
And I think we got that in the comments. You can just click on the comments. I got that for the Amazon.
Love that.
That should be helpful. When you go ahead and say there's so many database available, the next question is coming up, and that says, "What is your preferred database system, and why do you believe it has to offer over? What do you believe it has to offer over others?"
I'll give you an earth-shattering answer. It depends.
Depends.
I am absolutely, I'm absolutely not kidding there. I use everything from very small
Mhm.
databases, Tiny SQL and others, all the way out to Hive queries inside large sets of data. I like SQL Server. The main reason I like it is everything's in the box. It
Mhm.
runs on Linux to Windows to Kubernetes to everything else. And now it includes big data like Spark and
Yeah.
other non-relational stores. Oracle is fine. I was an Oracle DBA for many years, but I just feel more comes in the box with SQL Server, and there's a very rich eco structure. Sometimes the best choice is not necessarily the best technical choice. Is it supported? Can I get help? Can I get licensing? And so on. So I tend to bias towards that. But I use a lot of stuff. I use everything from, like I said, little tiny SQL databases
Mhm.
that are in memory, all the way out to, I believe it or not, a database I use quite often is SQLite. And
Okay.
when I teach relational calculus or just SQL, I use SQLite.
Perfect, perfect. We'll just take the second last question and we'll just wrap up the session. This is more like a generic here. It says Rahul would ask, what are some of the most difficult problems you have to face as a data architect, and how were you able to deal with them?
The number one problem is people. Technology is never the problem. So I say, here's this perfectly architected solution that you asked for based on
Mm.
my 40 years of knowledge and my talent and everything you said you wanted. And they go, yeah, we've decided to do something else.
Oh
We're
my
going to use this
goodness.
thing you didn't. And by the way, now take what I decided and make it work. And so probably having my advice rejected is the hardest thing from many standpoints, both
Mhm.
technical and personal. And what
Mhm.
I do is I've learned to be flexible. It's their
Mhm.
nickel.
Mhm.
And so if they decide this is the way we're doing it, I ask them, can you explain the rationale so that I do it correctly, that I
Mhm.
re-architect and do it correctly? And they say, yeah, we just kind of blah, and you, okay, sounds like a plan. And you architect as well as you can, and you explain the trade-offs you've made. So that's how I deal with it. But it's people. It's always
Yeah.
people.
All right. All right. So I think we will do that much of questions for this job. We're almost at time. We're at 59 minutes. The final question, Buck, I would like to go ahead and ask you a little non-technical would be, I know you have been architect. I mean, you have been in this industry like 30, 35 years. What do you do apart from all this architecture and programming and all this stuff on your spare time? Like, what's your hobbies and all that stuff?
Oh, I play various musical instruments. I play guitar and
Mm-hmm.
keyboards.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy, we have a boat, so I go out on the boat quite often. My
Mm-hmm.
wife and I walk 10 to 15 miles on Saturdays. We'd get a beach or a park or somewhere like that. I do a lot of reading, a whole lot of reading. We have
Mm-hmm.
a home, so of course there's always something to do here. I work on small engines when I have a moment. I like wood carving. I enjoy that. Let's see. Um, that's about it. My favorite thing to do in the world is travel.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that's been ground to a screeching halt. I can't
Mhm.
wait to get back out because I love to interact with new cultures. I really do.
Yeah, we would, if time permits, but we would definitely like to have you here in India. We do this CSharpCorner annual conference, one of the largest here in North India. That's 6 to 7,000 developers, and we would
Wow.
definitely like to have you over here. I'm really sorry for all the comments that are coming in. We won't be able to take in. We have some of our MVPs asking in our private channels. If time permits, we would definitely have you even next year, maybe sometime under this live show. Then we can take
Yeah,
these
sure.
questions.
Happy to chat further. We've opened up so many cans of worms here. We have a lot to talk about, don't we?
Yeah, definitely. But thank you so much for your time, Buck. I, Stephen Simon, on behalf of entire C Sharp Corner community and its millions of users, would like to thank you for your valuable time and the contributions you have made to the community. It was an amazing session. You covered the entire ecosystem of the data architecture, and thank you so much, Buck. And have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Thank you very much. Right back at you.